Great. Well, so what is your main motivation for running in this 2008 election? What are the main motivators behind your opposition to the Republican and Democratic nominee?
I think essentially to go back and look at where I came from to understand why I'm running for office. Mainly I'm running because I'm not happy with the war in Iraq, not happy with the foreign policy that we have, and as a Iraq veteran, I think that I have a moral standing in saying why we should end this war, and I'm not happy with the way that our current congressperson is handling that.
Okay. So what are the things that Welsh has done that you find objectionable in terms of handling the Iraq war and the military in general?
Well, a few weeks ago on the Burlington Free Press and in Vermont Public Radio, he was saying that he's never voted for funding for the war unless it was directly tied to bringing troops home. And that simply is a false statement. There's at least two bills that I'm aware of, H.R. 2206 that was voted on May 10th that he voted for that had that provided funding without any type of timetable, and also H.J. 52, which provided $9 billion for funding the war in Iraq and had no timetables for withdrawal. So I have at least two pieces of, two records that he voted for that clearly state that.
Okay. And so clearly you are in opposition to the Iraq war, and you have some personal ties. You mentioned briefly that you are an Iraq veteran. Do you want to just give us some background about your military experience, how it then brought you to Vermont, and just a little bit about yourself?
March of 2003, in the late March, after the invasion of Baghdad, I enlisted in the Army because I believed the reasons that we were over there: weapons of mass destruction, bringing democracy to a foreign nation, completely forgetting the fact that they were a sovereign nation and had its right to own self-determination. My time that I spent there, I found cities that were destroyed. I found families that were destroyed. I found infrastructure like roads and bridges and buildings that have been obliterated. Also electricity that was, people didn't have electricity, they didn't have clean running water. I found all these things. I found, I saw all the tragedies of what war brings. But I did not find weapons of mass destruction, and I did not find a reason for us to be there. What I also found over there was profiteering from corporations. For instance, KBR, who is basically the base sponsor of every base in Iraq, does our laundry, they do our food. And the problem I have with that is when we first invaded Iraq, we caused mass unemployment. And when KBR hired people in, they hired foreign nationals. They didn't hire United States citizens. I mean, they did for some of the supervisory work, but a majority of the workforce was, foreign nationals from the Philippines or some other third world nation that don't have wage standards and do not have compliance standards, which led to a few deaths. Believe it or not, there's been documented cases of soldiers being electrocuted in showers because of faulty wiring.
Wow. I think 6 deaths, right?
Yeah, about half a dozen. And this wouldn't have happened if you were up to U.S. compliance standards, and these things aren't being followed through. I also found mercenary groups like Triple Canopy and Blackwater. They would provide security in the green zone, and they also would provide security and escort services for convoys to and from bases. And what happens, you'd have families that are being shot in cars at intersections for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It posed no immediate threat to these people. But the big majority, they're not subject to U.S. law, they're not subject to international law, they're not subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So they're not being held accountable for their actions, and it's something that really appalled me. By the time I was about a quarter of the way into my deployment, I realized that this war was wrong, and more information was coming forward showing that we were kind of coerced into this and lied to as American citizens. But by the time I was done with the war, I felt I was used, and I felt betrayed. I felt like I was a gear that was used to turn a profit in the corporate machinery. I just wasn't happy with that.
Yeah, and I actually just saw some legislation or a press release today about the company Blackwater, and there's really a lot of heat on them to be accountable for their actions and the enormous government contracts they've had. I think there was back in 2001 about $1 million worth of government contracts that they had, and today in 2008 it's well over $1 billion in contracts they have for their work over in Iraq.
Yeah, not only are they working in Iraq and Afghanistan, they just did a patrol in North Carolina looking for a suspect that the police were looking for. They were using the helicopters, and I don't know if they're still subject to, I mean, are they subject to American law? I'm not familiar with that. It's something that does concern me, is that we're privatizing our criminal investigation departments.
Mm-hmm.
So you're obviously opposed to this, but if you're elected to Congress, what plan will you push forward in terms of military deployments or deploying out of Iraq? Like, Welch has pushed the party line on this in terms of the Democrats. What would be your plan for this?
Well, first of all, you could use the office as a soapbox for speaking up to citizens and telling them, you know, this war is wrong. And one thing I can do as a congressperson is the best way of reining in, and the best way of ending a war from a congressional standpoint is stop funding it completely. And even, I'm not talking about not funding it at all, and because a lot of people worry about that if you stop funding that, bullets will disappear, you know, the armor will disappear, you know, they're not going to get food. There's money in the pipeline, and if people aren't getting paid, you can always push legislation through to, you know, fund their withdrawal.